So today we're going to be looking at food chains and food webs. We're going to be identifying the different roles in a food chain, combining food chains to make food webs, and then describing the role of decomposers in a food web. Here we have a really simple food chain. And as ever with these videos, I'm going to ask you some questions. What you should be doing is you should be pausing the video when I ask you a question, seeing if you can answer it. If you're able to answer it, that's great. Unpause the video, see whether you got the question right, and move on. So first question, what do you think this food chain is showing us? So it shows us what the organisms eat. So the zebra eats grass, and the lion eats the zebra. Notice though the directions of the arrows. The arrow goes from the grass to the zebra. That shows us that the zebra is eating the grass rather than the grass eating the zebra. And the arrow goes from the zebra to the lion, meaning that the lion is eating the zebra rather than the other way around. It also shows us the direction that the energy stored in the food is going. So there's energy, chemical energy stored in the grass, and that's being transferred to the zebra. That's why the arrow is pointing from the grass to the zebra, and the same from the zebra to the lion. The energy stored within the meat of the zebra is being transferred to the lion. Essentially, what is eating what? So we've got the zebra eating the grass, the lion eating the zebra. And we call it a chain. We call this a food chain because one thing follows the next. It's a bit like a regular metal chain. You've got one link, then you've got the next link, then you've got the next link. And one thing follows the other. If you were to take out one of the links, the chain would break. If I were to take out the zebra, the lion would not have anything to eat because the lion needs the zebra. The lion can't survive on grass. If I took out the grass, the zebra would have nothing to eat, and so then the lion had nothing to eat. The chain would be broken. So there's loads and loads of different food chains out there. I've chosen for that first example grass and zebras and lions. It's a nice one to try and understand, but let's have a look at another one as well. Let's have a look at this example. So we've got an acacia tree, a tree that grows in Africa, and acacia trees, the leaves of the acacia trees are eaten by giraffes, and giraffes in turn are eaten by hyenas. So the energy from the acacia tree is being transferred to the giraffe, and the energy from the giraffe is being transferred to the hyena when they all eat. Let's put them both one on top of the other. We've got our original food chain up there with the grass being eaten by the zebra and the zebra being eaten by the lion, and the one underneath we've got the acacia tree being eaten by the giraffe and the giraffe being eaten by the hyena. Now food chains all have common features, so let's talk about what some of those common features are. First of all, the bits at the beginning, we call them producers. Now producers are, generally speaking, plants. They can also be things like algae. Anything that can do photosynthesis, anything that can produce its own food. So grass and trees and algae and things like that, they produce their own food via a process called photosynthesis. So they're called producers because they produce their own food. Those things are eaten by herbivores. Herbivores are animals that eat plants. They don't eat meat, they just eat plants. So zebras and giraffes are good examples there of herbivores. And those herbivores are eaten by carnivores. They're eaten by animals that eat meat. Now, that's not it. We can also classify the herbivores and the carnivores as consumers. When we say consumers, we mean animals that consume other things. So the herbivores are consuming the producers, and the carnivores are consuming the herbivores. So both the herbivores and the carnivores we would class as being consumers as well. Another thing we can talk about, herbivores are classed as being prey animals and carnivores as predators. Predators feed on prey. So this is how we can class and classify animals and plants. Look at it in a bit more detail. And so producers, our examples were grass and the acacia tree. Obviously any kind of tree with leaves would pretty much work here. Anything that you can eat that's a plant. They make their own food by photosynthesis, and examples would include any green plants and algae. Herbivores are examples that we've given are zebras and giraffes, but there's loads more. You could have cows, you could have sheep, you could have deer, anything like that. They only eat plants, and they are what we call prey animals. They're eaten by other animals. Carnivores, our examples were lions and hyenas, but dogs, cats even, would count as carnivores. They eat other animals, and we call them predators. Sometimes we might call them scavengers, so hyenas might go and scavenge a kill as well. So a lion might have taken down a zebra. A hyena may very well go in and have a go at eating some of the zebra once the lions had enough. And again, we call these things consumers. Herbivores and carnivores we call consumers because they're animals that eat other plants or animals. They eat plants or other animals. So that's how we classify things within a food chain. Producers are eaten by herbivores. Herbivores are eaten by carnivores. So, if I'm not mistaken, you are a human. Would you count as a consumer? The answer is yes, you would count as a consumer. Are you a herbivore or are you a carnivore? Well, actually, technically speaking, you're neither. You're what's known as an omnivore because you eat both plants and meat. You eat animals and plants, or at least you have the ability to. Maybe you're a vegetarian, but you certainly have the ability to eat both plants and meat. Okay, so lots of words that we use in everyday language in English and quite a lot in science as well come from Latin words. And I think this is probably a good point just to break off and have a look at some of the words that we've looked at so far, see where they come from, because carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, they're quite odd sounding words. And it can be quite useful to work out where these words come from. So the word herbivore, it comes from Latin. Its roots are in Latin. Herba, which means plant, and voro, which means I eat. Or I devour in Latin. So a herbivore is essentially something that eats plants. I eat plants. A carnivore comes from the Latin carnis, meaning meat, and again that voro meaning I eat, or vorare meaning to eat. So a carnivore is something that eats meat. An omnivore, omnis means all. The voro or vorare again means eat. So an omnivore is someone who eats everything, someone who eats both meat and plants. Now, this guy over here on the right is saying nunc scimus Latine. That means now we know Latin. And let's have a quick look at that middle word actually as well, scimus. S-C-I-M-U-S. The first three letters of that word, S-C-I, are the same as the first three letters of science, of the word science. If you have a look down here, nunc scimus Latina, you can probably work out which word corresponds to which bit. Nunc basically means now. Latine means Latin. And the scimus, that's we know. The sci bit means no. The sci or the sci bit means no. So the sci of science means no as well. Science is all about knowing. That's what science is. The word science comes from the word scio, meaning I know in Latin. It's all about knowledge. Right, back to the serious questions. Who would win in a fight between a hyena and a lion? Hopefully you come to the conclusion that the lion would probably win. The lion could probably quite easily kill and eat the hyena if it wanted to. The hyena, though, would have a much harder time doing the same thing. It probably couldn't kill and eat the lion. Now, animals that aren't eaten by other animals, we call them top predators. They're the top of the food chain, the king of the jungle, whatever you want to call them. Top predators would be the term that we'd use to describe them there. So lions we would describe as being top predators. There aren't very many top predators. Polar bears we'd probably call top predators. Tigers we'd probably call top predators. In the examples we've given so far, though, lions would be the top predators. Food chains are great. I think we've got a bit of an understanding now of food chains. We've got our producers. The producers are eaten by the herbivores, and the herbivores are eaten by the carnivores. But in reality, things aren't ever really quite that simple. I mean, do lions only eat zebras? The answer is no. They do eat other things as well. This is a picture of a lion chasing down a gazelle, for instance. Do giraffes only eat acacia leaves? They only eat the leaves of that tree. Well, no, they don't. They also eat grass. They eat other things like grass. They look a bit ridiculous when they do it, but they do also eat grass. So food chains are never really quite as simple as all that. So in reality, what we don't really see in the wild is food chains. What we see are what we call food webs. So we can take a nice simple thing like grass is eaten by zebras and zebras are eaten by lions, but we can add a bit of complication by seeing what else eats those things. Let's see if we can build up a bit of a food web. Start off with a bit of grass. Grass is eaten. Remember that arrow pointing away from the grass means the energy is being transferred from the grass to something else. And in our first example, we said that grass was eaten by zebras. And then we said that zebras were in turn eaten by lions. But other things also eat grass. Something else that also eats grass would be a giraffe. Giraffes eat grass. And giraffes are also eaten by lions. So we've got a slightly more complicated thing going on here. Originally, we only had grass being eaten by zebras and zebras being eaten by lions, but now we've got grass also being eaten by giraffes and giraffes being eaten by lions. Giraffes also eat something else. Got this arrow pointing towards the giraffe, meaning it's taking in energy from somewhere else as well. And the thing we've mentioned so far would be acacia trees, these trees with the leaves that giraffes find so delicious. Giraffes are eaten by lions, but they're also eaten by hyenas. Hyenas, in turn, can be eaten by lions. Lions are a lot stronger than hyenas. They can take down a hyena and they can eat it if they want to. This funny-looking animal is a wildebeest. If you've ever seen The Lion King, it's the animal that comes rushing down the side of the cliff just before the scene with Simba's dad, Mufasa. Very sad. So, wildebeests will also eat acacia trees, or the leaves on the acacia trees, but they'll also be eaten by hyenas, but they're also eaten by lions. Can you see how we're starting to get quite a complicated picture built up here with only, 5 animals and 2 plants? It's already starting to get quite complicated. Just to add further complication to it, along comes a cheetah. And the cheetah eats a zebra, and might even decide to tuck into a bit of giraffe. And the lion, as well, being the top predator, can also eat some cheetah if it really wants to. So we've started to get quite a complicated looking thing going on here, and this is what's known as a food web. So not just a food chain, which is a simple one thing after the other, like in a chain. This is a food web. If you imagine a spider's web, it's a lot more complicated. We've got all these things joined together in different points. And that's because in reality, animals don't just eat one thing and don't, generally speaking, just get eaten by one thing either. It's often more complicated than that. So we can even get more complicated than this if we really want to. We could start including things like antelopes or leopards or gazelles or kudu. Have fruit trees, we could have elephants, have all sorts of things going on. We won't do that right now, but you need to be aware that it can get a lot more complicated than this. As a separate question, it's often quite interesting to think about this question. What would happen if you were to take away one organism? So let's pick an organism. If we were to take away the grass, for instance, what might happen? Now, wildebeest don't have anything to do with grass, at least not according to this particular example. Giraffes eat acacia trees, but they also eat grass. If there's not as much grass, maybe there won't be as many giraffes because there's not as much food for them. If there's not as much food for the giraffes, that's going to make the hyenas go a little bit hungry. Going to make the cheetahs go a little bit hungry, perhaps. So everything else will probably be okay, but you're going to have a bit more hunger going on the savannah. Zebras, on the other hand, if in this example where we're saying they only eat grass, zebras are not going to have a good time if we take away the grass. There won't be any zebras left because there won't be any food for them to eat. What if we were to take away 2 organisms? And we could choose 2, like the zebra and the hyena, for instance. If we took away the zebra and the hyena, there might be fewer lions and fewer cheetahs because they don't have quite as much to eat. But there may well be more wildebeest because suddenly there's no hyenas to hunt down the wildebeest. So these are the kinds of things that make this food web a bit more complicated and a bit more nuanced than it might at first seem. What if the 2 organisms that we took away were the grass and the acacia tree? We take away the grass and the acacia tree, there's suddenly no food for the zebras, for the giraffes, or for the wildebeest. If there's no food for the zebras, the giraffe, and the wildebeest, they're not going to survive. If they don't survive, then there's not going to be any food for the cheetahs or the hyenas either. And if there's no food for the cheetahs or the hyenas, then in turn there's also no food for the lions. Take away those 2 organisms, things really do start to come tumbling down. And this, I suppose, is one of the reasons why we're so keen as scientists to make sure that we don't have species going extinct. Because if we do have species going extinct, it can have all sorts of unintended consequences. It could be really, really bad for what we call biodiversity. Right. So, if no other animal can kill an eater lion, I mean, maybe not quite true, but in our example, we're going to say that's the case. What does happen when a lion dies? What happens when a lion dies is it's broken down by something called decomposers. Another funny word. If you think about somebody composing a piece of music, what they're doing is they're putting together all the notes on a page, getting a piece composed up for the piano or whatever it might be. So a decomposer, that D bit means going the other way around, essentially. So a decomposer is not it's somebody who puts things together, like somebody putting notes down onto a page to compose a piece of music. A decomposer is something that breaks things apart, takes things apart. Examples of decomposers would be things like worms or fungi, things like mushrooms or fungi, insects like flies and beetles, and things like bacteria. Those would be examples of decomposers. They can take something that is dead and they can break it down. When they break it down, they release nutrients back into the soil. So the process of breaking down a dead animal or a dead plant puts nutrients back into the soil, and this then helps plants to grow. More plants grow, meaning that herbivores can eat the plants. If you've got herbivores eating the plants, that means you've got carnivores who are able to eat those herbivores. Eventually the carnivores die, and the decomposers decompose them. And after a while, the cycle repeats. We end up with the glorious circle of life.